For 300,000 years, a species lived through conditions that should have been impossible to survive. Temperatures that dropped to -40 degrees Celsius, winters that lasted 8 months, landscapes so barren that entire regions of Europe contained almost no plant life for decades. And through all of it, they survived, by living directly inside the worst conditions the Ice Age had to offer. The Neanderthals. The question that should genuinely disturb you is not how they survived. It is why you couldn't. At least by the measure of brain complexity we usually cite, you are smarter than they were. You have better tools, sophisticated language, and access to 300,000 years of accumulated human knowledge. You have survived diseases, famines, wars, and collapses that should have ended our species, and you would last, at best, a few days in the world they called home. This is the story of what they knew that you don't, and it is also the story of why, in the end, even that wasn't enough. A Neanderthal standing next to you would look almost human, but the differences, once you see them, explain everything about how they survived and why you couldn't. Their bones were roughly 20 to 30% denser than yours. Forensic analysis of Neanderthal skeletons consistently shows healed fractures that would have been permanently debilitating in a modern human. Broken arms, crushed vertebrae, shattered ribs that had fully healed and been worked through. Their barrel-shaped chests were larger than yours by a significant margin, housing lungs with greater capacity to process cold air. Their nasal passages were enormous. Wide nasal architecture warmed and humidified frigid air before it reached the lungs. The same principle modern cold-weather military gear tries to replicate with fabric and technology. Neanderthals had it built in. Their legs were shorter relative to their bodies, reducing the surface area exposed to cold. Their arms were proportionally shorter too. Every exposed limb was a liability in -40-degree weather. They were also significantly stronger than you. Muscle attachment points on Neanderthal bones indicate upper body strength that would be exceptional even by the standards of modern professional athletes. This was not the result of exercise. It was the baseline, the minimum requirement for the life they lived. To understand what they were dealing with, you need to understand what the Ice Age actually felt like on the ground. The last glacial maximum, the coldest period Neanderthals endured, saw average temperatures in Central Europe roughly 10 to 15 degrees Celsius lower than today, which means winters regularly reached temperatures that modern meteorologists classify as life-threatening within minutes of unprotected exposure. -40 degrees Celsius is not a number that translates easily into human experience. Exposed skin begins to suffer frostbite within 5 to 10 minutes. Metal tools become too cold to grip without protection. A modern human, without fire, shelter, and appropriate clothing, will enter hypothermia within an hour. This was not an exceptional event for Neanderthals. They had no synthetic insulation, no sleeping bags rated for extreme cold, no chemical hand warmers, no emergency shelters. What they had was knowledge so deeply encoded into their culture and their bodies that we are only now beginning to understand its full sophistication. Here is the thing about Neanderthals that popular culture has spent decades getting wrong. The image of the hunched, slack-jawed, dim-witted cave dweller is not supported by the evidence. It is a story we told ourselves. Neanderthals controlled fire for at least 300,000 years. Hearth sites at Neanderthal cave dwellings show evidence of repeated maintained fires in the same locations across generations. Evidence from sites in France and Ukraine shows Neanderthals constructing shelters from mammoth bones and animal hides, engineered structures designed to trap heat and resist wind. They made clothing. Microscopic analysis of Neanderthal tools has identified specific wear patterns consistent with hide processing, scraping, softening, and preparing skins in ways that produce garments rather than coverings. Analysis of animal bones at Neanderthal sites shows deliberate selection of prey at specific times of year, adjusting hunting strategies to the rhythms of a landscape that changed dramatically between seasons. A knowledge transmitted across generations, refined over hundreds of thousands of years. They also made art. Ochre pigments found at Neanderthal sites predate modern human arrival in Europe by tens of thousands of years. Perforated shells used as jewelry, eagle talons collected and arranged in patterns. Everything they ate, they killed or found in a landscape that was actively trying to kill them back. The Ice Age megafauna of Europe was not the docile wildlife of modern nature documentaries. Cave bears stood up to 11 feet tall and weighing up to 500 kilograms. Neanderthal skeletons show injuries consistent with close-range combat with large animals, with a frequency that suggests this was not an occasional catastrophe, but a regular occupational hazard. Isotope analysis of Neanderthal bones shows their diet was dominated by large game: mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, bison, reindeer. This was not a choice. In a landscape where plant life was sparse and seasonal, large animals were the primary caloric source. Modern survival training teaches that the priority hierarchy for short-term survival is shelter, water, fire, food. Food is last because the human body can survive weeks without it. But weeks without food, in -40-degree temperatures, is not survivable. The caloric demand of cold weather survival is enormous. Estimates suggest 4,000 to 6,000 calories per day for sustained activity in extreme cold. Around 45,000 years ago, modern humans arrived in Europe. At that point, Neanderthals had been living there for at least 200,000 years. They knew every valley, every cave, every seasonal migration route of every prey animal in a landscape they had occupied for longer than modern humans had existed as a species. Within roughly 5,000 years, they were gone. The exact cause of Neanderthal extinction is still debated. Climate fluctuations during this period were severe. Rapid temperature swings that compressed and fragmented the habitats Neanderthals depended on. Genetic analysis suggests Neanderthal populations were never large, probably numbering in the tens of thousands across all of Europe. Small populations are devastatingly vulnerable to disease and to local extinction events. Modern humans brought diseases against which Neanderthals had no immunity. They brought different cognitive tools, social networking that allowed modern human groups to share information, trade resources, and coordinate across distances that Neanderthal social structures apparently did not. Between 1% and 4% of the DNA of every non-African person alive today is Neanderthal. They did not simply vanish, they were absorbed slowly into the population that replaced them. The last Neanderthals living in isolated pockets in southern Iberia around 40,000 years ago were not destroyed by a superior species. They were surrounded, thinned, and eventually dissolved. 300,000 years of surviving the unsurvivable. And in the end, it was not the cold that got them. It was us. They had something hard to name and hard to build, a knowledge so deep and so tested that it lived not just in their minds, but in their hands. Knowledge that took 300,000 years to accumulate and 5,000 years to erase. The Neanderthals survived everything the Ice Age threw at them. They just couldn't survive. Us.